Hi, fourth grade friends. It's Miss Wanda from Waterfront Botanical Gardens, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I have been teaching lessons based on the JCPS Choice Board, but today I'm doing sort of an alternative lesson to that. I'm doing a lesson on plant structures and their functions because I've had some teachers contact me and ask about this lesson because a lot of teachers are supposed to be teaching this in the spring, this time of year at school. So we're going to be talking today about different places in the world and the different plants that live there. Boys and girls, during this lesson, I might use the word ecosystem. And an ecosystem is a place in the world where there are living things like animals and plants that interact with or use non-living things like the sun and water and rocks and air. And if you think about that for a second, if you think about how a living thing like an animal, for instance, uses a non-living thing like water, well, how does an animal use water? They might drink water or they might bathe in the water. Some animals use water to regulate their body temperature, especially like reptiles and amphibians and fish. The water around them helps to keep their body temperature at a constant because they're cold-blooded or ectotherms. So that's some ways that animals, a living thing, uses a non-living thing like water. What about plants and the sun? Plants are living things and they use the sun, for instance, to make their own food and to help them grow. So that living thing uses a non-living thing. So just think about that as we're going through our lesson today. And if I use that word ecosystem, know that I'm talking about a place where there are living things and non-living things. The first ecosystem I'm going to talk about today, boys and girls, is a desert. And there are different kinds of deserts, but today in my lesson I'm going to be talking mostly about deserts in the southwestern United States. And I have a picture. I'm going to bring it in for you guys to see. A picture of a desert. This is a picture from the Sonoran Desert. And if you look at this picture, there's lots of sort of typical things that you would think about in a desert, like big rock formations in the back there. Ooh, I know this plant right here. It's a cactus. We're going to talk a lot about cacti today. Different kinds of shrubs and plants there on the ground, and definitely some dry, rocky soil there in our desert picture. So I want to first start off by talking a little bit about the climate in the desert. When I say climate, boys and girls, I'm talking about weather over time. If somebody asks you what the weather was today, you might be able to tell them what the temperature, the average temperature was for the day, or you might be able to tell them that it's sunny or windy. And that's the weather for today. But climate is weather over time. So not just the weather for the day, but the weather over the year or over years. So when we talk about the climate in the desert, we can pretty much always say that it is hot during the day. It can get really hot, over 100 degrees during the day in the desert. So hot during the day, but then something happens at nighttime. And at nighttime, when the sun sets, it cools off. So hot during the day, much cooler at night. And then another thing about the climate in the desert is that it can be very, very windy. In fact, the wind can be so strong sometimes that they have something called sandstorms. The winds are so strong that they blow the sand from the ground up into the air. So they can be very, very windy. Hot during the day, cools off at night, windy, and of course it is very dry. For a desert to be a desert, they need to get 10 inches or less of rain or precipitation. That's the fancy science word for moisture that falls from the sky. So 10 inches or less of rain. Okay, so that's the climate in the desert. And animals and plants, living things in the desert, have to find ways to survive in a place where it gets really, really hot, then cools off at night. It can be very, very windy, and then it's very dry. They don't have very much rain. Let's talk a little bit about the soil in the desert. So the soil in the desert, what do you think if you were to think about that picture? If we were to look at this guy, we were kind of to look down here, or if you were to think about maybe some movies or cartoons you've watched before that are about the desert, or again, if you've traveled to a desert before, what do you think the soil is like in the desert? Do you think that there's a lot of moisture in there? Do you think it's nice and wet? Or do you think it's really dry? Yeah, so it's probably going to be really dry. The soil does not have a lot of moisture in it. So we know that's going to make it pretty hard for plants to grow. They're gonna come upon some challenges because that soil is going to be really, really dry. And then there's not a lot of living organic matter in that soil. So there's not a lot of things that have died and become part of the soil like there is here in Kentucky. Like for instance, in my yard, I have big oak trees in the yard. They lose their leaves every fall. Those leaves break down and they become part of the soil, and it makes the soil really good and rich in nutrients. But not a lot of that is happening in the desert because they don't have those big, huge deciduous trees that lose their leaves. And so there's less biodiversity there, less living stuff there. And so there's not a lot of organic matter in the soil. So the soil is very poor in nutrients. So not a lot of nutrients down in the soil that those plants can use to grow. And then of course there's probably a lot more stuff like rocks and sand in their soil than there is good decomposing, rotting organic matter like there is here in Kentucky. So the soil is dry and poor in nutrients. So we have to think about some different kinds of plants that we might find in the desert. And I'm gonna show you some pictures first of some types of plants. Okay. Some types of plants that might be in the desert. And so let's take a look at a couple of pictures that we have here. Here is a little bush that grows in the Sonoran Desert called a brittle bush. So it's not just cacti that grow there in the desert. They do have little flowering plants like bushes that grow in the desert. That's called a brittle bush. There is also a plant called an ocotillo. There's that guy, an ocotillo. He's another kind of plant that's sort of like a bush or a shrub. He looks like a cactus, but he's not. He is more like a bush or a shrub, an ocotillo. And then, of course, there's lots of different kinds of cacti, not just one kind of cacti. When you look at pictures of the desert, especially the Sonoran Desert, like the one like that we're talking about today, a lot of times you'll see a cactus like this one that's like long and straight, goes way up into the air, and then has arms that kind of stick off to the side. That's called a saguaro cactus, and it's a very common plant in the Sonoran Desert. But there are other types of cacti too, like for instance, I have a picture here. It's a good picture. It's an animal and a plant in it. It's of a tortoise, and he is eating, believe it or not, the fruit from this cactus. Does anybody know what kind of cactus that is there? It's a prickly pear cactus. That's another type of cactus that grows in the southwestern United States. And it has these pink fleshy fruits that grow off of it. And that tortoise he is munching on the prickly pear cactus and getting some nutrition and some water from that plant. So a prickly pear cactus. This is another picture of a cactus. It's just the side of the cactus, but it's called an organ pipe cactus. And I really like this picture because you can see the spines or the needle on the cactus, and you can also see how this cactus goes in and out and in and out and in and out. So let me add some things to some different types of plants to my list here on my board. I'm going to put, the first plant I showed you was brittle bush. Okay, also the ocotillo. And then we also have cacti. Lots of different kinds of cacti. Remember we said the saguaro and the prickly pear and the Oregon pipe. So lots of different kinds of cactus. So what we want to talk about, boys and girls, are different types of structures that that plants have that help them survive in this place that's really hot and really dry. Okay, and where there's the soil doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it. It's very rocky and very sandy. So what are some structures or ways that plants survive in an ecosystem like this? So one of the things is that, remember this picture that I showed a moment ago of the Oregon pipe cactus? If you look, it kind of bends in and goes out and bends in and goes out. One of the ways that plants like this survive is that they are able to bring in water and store water inside their stem to be used for later, because it doesn't rain very often. So when it does rain, they want to collect that water and they want to store it for later. And the Oregon pipe cactus and the saguaro cactus as well have these sort of folds in them, which allows them to expand and open as they fill up with water, and then contract as they utilize the water. So to expand and contract. So that's one way, that's one structure that that a cactus might have. It has the ability to store water and expand and contract as it's utilizing that water for photosynthesis. And another thing about cacti is that they have, look at my little cactus friend here. They have, oh, look at that. Can you take a look at that? Look at it. This one has some folds in it as well. It kind of goes in and out. And so as this one needs to store water, it can expand. And then as it utilizes that water, it can contract. But one of the most, noticeable features or structures on a cactus are those needles or the spines that grow off of the cactus. So needles and spines are the leaves on the cactus, and they're very, very thin and skinny, and they're also pretty hard and waxy. And those little bitty skinny needles, those little bitty skinny leaves help them to conserve water. When a plant has a nice big broad leaf like a maple leaf or an oak leaf or a sycamore leaf like the ones that we have in Kentucky, when a plant has a big leaf on it like that, it will lose water through something called transpiration. Do you know how when we get hot, we sweat? We lose water through our skin. Now, plants can lose water through their leaves. That's called transpiration. And when they have big, broad leaves, well, they're going to lose a lot of water. But as for this cactus, it has these little skinny needles, little skinny spines that are hard and waxy. And so they're not losing a lot of water through transpiration, and those little spines are helping it to save and conserve water. So needles for leaves. So we've got that it has the folds in it, and it can expand and contract, and it also has needles for leaves. So another type of structure or adaptation that a lot of plants in the desert have is that they have roots that are shallow. What does that word mean? The word shallow. Shallow is the opposite of deep. So if you think of roots that go deep in the ground, that's not the kind of roots that a lot of the plants in the desert have. Plants in the desert have shallow roots, so roots that are really, really close to the surface. So when it does rain down, dribble, dribble, drop, dribble, 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 drop, drop, drop. Those roots are really close to the surface, and they're able to suck up that water very, very quickly so that they can use it for photosynthesis and help them to grow. So roots near the surface, so they can suck up the water very carefully or quickly. And then also, not just roots that are close to the surface, but roots that really sort of stretch out really far in every direction. So that if there's water way over there, they can still suck up that water and get that water. If there's water way over there, they can still suck up that water. So roots that kind of stretch out really far and are really, really close to the surface. Here's a picture of that ocotillo that I was talking about earlier. I printed out this picture so you can see. Look at these. After there was some sort of weathering or erosion, whatever you want to say, something has caused a lot of the rocky soil around this plant to kind of weather away, and those roots are sticking up, fairly close to the surface, and we can just see them stretching out in every direction. So they have shallow roots. So 3 structures that plants in the desert have that help them to survive are the folds. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them have folds which allow them to store water and expand and contract as they have water inside of them, and then they use that water. They also have needles for leaves. Remember, those are really thin, and so they're not losing a lot of water through transpiration. And then also they have those roots that are really close to the surface, so they can suck up that rainwater really super quickly when it does rain. Okay, so those are structures that plants in the desert have. Now we're going to switch gears really quick, and we're going to talk about a different sort of ecosystem. We're going to talk about a different sort of place where there are living things and non-living things. Let me kind of erase some of this stuff down here. That way we're not getting too confused about what's going on. So we're going to talk now about a different ecosystem altogether. We're going to talk about the rainforest. Now, sometimes when we're younger and we talk about a rainforest, sometimes we use the word jungle. So if it helps you to think of a jungle when we're talking about rainforest today, that's cool. You can think of it that way. But we're talking about a rainforest, and some of the pictures, in fact, all of the pictures that I printed out today are from the Amazon rainforest in South America. So it's kind of always a little difficult to find pictures that are landscape pictures, like big, broad pictures of a rainforest. Because when you look at a rainforest from far away, like from a drone, like if you're taking a picture of a rainforest from far away, it's just a lot of trees, because there are a lot of different plants in the rainforest. So here's a picture. Again, it's a lot of trees. It's an aerial shot, so a shot from up above, like what a drone would take, of the Amazon rainforest. So we're seeing lots of trees and sort of some hilly mountainous areas. And then I also, because Miss Wanda really likes animals from the rainforest, I've also printed out a couple of pictures of animals just for fun. I know we're talking about plants today, but I have printed out a couple of pictures just for fun of some animals that might live in the Amazon rainforest, like this guy. This is one of Miss Wanda's favorite animals, and I bet some of you guys really like this animal too. This was my favorite animal when I was a little girl, when I was in 4th grade. This was my favorite animal, and now these guys are so popular that it's become a lot of people's favorite animal as well, which I'm very excited about. This is a sloth. This is a 3-toed sloth. These guys live in the rainforest. And then another one of my favorite animals that live in the rainforest is these guys. Macaws, really big, bright, beautiful parrots that live in the rainforest in South America. So lots of different kinds of animals, but of course we are talking about plants today, so we're going to show you some pictures of plants in just a moment. But talking about the climate in the rainforest, remember, boys and girls, that means weather over time. If we're looking at the Amazon rainforest in South America, we're looking at a place that's very close to the equator. So it's hot all year round. Okay? And unlike the desert, when the sun goes down, it stays hot. So it's hot all year round, and it's hot both day and night. Okay? And the reason it's hot both day and night, when the sun goes down, it still stays hot, is because it's also, I'm going to erase my notes here. Give me a moment. The reason it stays hot even at night is because there's so much moisture in the air. If you guys have lived in Louisville your whole short little beautiful lives, if you've lived in Louisville your whole life, you've probably experienced a summer here in Louisville, Kentucky. And in our summers, there's always a lot of moisture in the air. We call moisture in the air, we call that humidity. There's a lot of water vapor in the air. When you go outside and you take a breath, you can kind of feel how thick that air is because there's so much water vapor in the air. So in the rainforest, it's hot both day and night. There's a lot of humidity, hot all year round. And then, of course, in the rainforest, it does a lot of raining in the rainforest. So they get a lot of rain. It rains pretty much, almost every day in the rainforest. And in the Amazon rainforest, they get about 120 inches of rain per year. Okay, so that is a very different type of place than the desert we just talked about. Okay, the desert was hot during the day and cooler at night, and they didn't get very much rain at all. But in the rainforest, it's raining almost every single day. Now, something that gets kind of confusing for a lot of kids and adults too is that when you talk about soil, in a rainforest, the soil in the rainforest, when you think about it, there's lots of trees, there's lots of different plants that grow there. So in your mind, you imagine, golly, there's so many plants that grow there. There must be really good soil in the rainforest. And that's actually not that true. Because it rains almost every day, because it rains so constantly, a lot of the nutrients in the soil get washed away into the river, like the Amazon River, get washed out pretty regularly. So there's not a lot of good, thick nutrients in that soil that those plants can use. So the soil actually happens to be pretty thin because a lot of it gets eroded or weathered or washed away. And there's not a lot of nutrients. The nutrients that are in the soil get used up very quickly by all of the different plants that are there. So believe it or not, even though it would seem, because there's so much greenery and so much life in the rainforest, it would seem that they have really thick, high nutrient soil. The truth is that the soil in the rainforest is pretty thin and it's low in nutrients because they get washed away by all the rain. Okay, so let's take a look now at the different kinds of plants. Okay, types of plants that we might find in a rainforest. Okay, so lots of different kinds of plants in the rainforest. There are more different types of plants in a rainforest than in any other ecosystem in the world. That's because the most biodiversity is found there in the rainforest. We're going to look at a couple of plants. First of all, let's take a look at this tree here. Look at this tree. This is the bottom part of the tree. This tree is probably a very, very tall tree. It probably stretches into the sky. But this part of the tree that we're looking at is the bottom part of the tree where it touches the earth. And next to this tree, there are some really interesting roots that come out. And they kind of vine out. And because that soil down there, remember I said the soil is very thin and it lacks in nutrients. Because the soil isn't very thick, it is very hard for that soil underneath the ground to support big, huge trees like those ones found in the rainforest. So often trees will grow something called buttress roots, which are roots that sort of come out above the soil, and they prop up this big, huge tree. They kind of bell out on the sides, and they prop up and hold up that big, huge tree in soil that is pretty thin. So buttress roots, that's one sort of structure that plants in the rainforest have. Let's take a look at another plant. Now, this one is a tree that is growing in the rainforest, in the Amazon rainforest. And it might not look very familiar to you, but this plant is used to make something that a lot of you probably like to eat. This is a cacao plant, and it is used to make chocolate. So if you celebrated the holiday of Easter with your family recently, and you might have and you might not have, but if you did, you might have got some chocolate that was made from a cacao plant. This plant is another plant that is very common in the rainforest. This is a coffee plant. And Miss Wanda really likes the coffee plant because she likes to drink some coffee in the morning. I bet some of your parents are drinking some coffee at home right now. But there's a coffee plant. But the plant we're going to talk about the most today, boys and girls, is a plant called a bromeliad. Okay, so here's our bromeliad plant. And this is one type of plant that grows in the rainforest. And bromeliads are really cool. Bromeliads can grow on the ground. So they can grow out of the ground just like other plants that we know about, like, something that might be growing in your yard, a bush or a tree grows in the ground. But they also will sometimes grow on the surface of other plants. Now, a plant that grows on the surface of other plants is called an epiphyte. And plants like bromeliads, they grow on the surface of trees and other plants, but they don't hurt the other plants. They're not sucking out any of the nutrients or killing the other tree or killing the plant. They're just growing on the surface to kind of help themselves out a little bit. Okay, so bromeliads grow up in the trees. So something I want you to notice about this bromeliad plant is, first of all, the leaves on this plant are very waxy. They get a lot of rain in the rainforest, and if they didn't have these waxy leaves, all of that rain, dribble, dribble, drop, dribble, 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 drop, 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 all of that rain, when it would hit the plant, if it didn't have waxy leaves, the plant would absorb it and it would get too much water. So waxy leaves are a structure or an adaptation that helps rainforest plants to survive, because when the water hits that leaf, the water will roll right off. Now with bromeliads, because they're growing on the surface of other plants, let me show you a picture really quick. Ba-ba-ba-bum. I'm multitasking as I'm doing my video. Okay, here is a picture of some bromeliads. So you can look, there's a big huge branch there, and then those red bromeliads are growing on the branch of the tree. Yeah. So with bromeliads, they're growing up on the branch of the tree, and so their roots aren't anchored in the ground. And I know, because I've learned this before, that when plants need water, they suck up water through their roots. But as for this bromeliad, if its roots are just planted on that tree, if it's just growing on top of that tree, its roots aren't in the soil, so it's much harder for it to get water. So with these waxy leaves, the shape of the plant, with the waxy leaves, the water will go into the middle of the plant, and it actually kind of cups the water and stores the water, and that's how this plant gets water for photosynthesis. Now, something else that's pretty cool about bromeliads is that when they do create that little cup in the rainforest and they collect water there, other animals can go there, drink the water. Some animals even lay their eggs in water, like amphibians, like frogs, like poison dart frogs or tree frogs in the rainforest. So these create, they have like a little cup that they hold their water in. Growing on top of a plant too, now you can imagine if they're growing down on the ground, if this bromeliad was growing on the ground and it was in this lush rainforest where there were so many trees, it's going to be pretty shady on the forest floor. But growing higher up in the tree allows it to access more sunlight, and get more sunlight that way. So that's another structure, another behavioral adaptation that helps the plant out. Growing closer to the sun helps it to absorb more sunlight and get more sunlight that way as it's higher up on the tree. So bromeliads. So let's add that one to our list. We're going to add types of plants. We want to say that there's trees with buttress roots. Remember, those are the big roots that kind of bell out and help support those big trees in the thin soil. Buttress roots. We've got cacao. That's the plant that makes chocolate. We have coffee. The coffee plants that make the coffee. There's also, boys and girls, I didn't really talk about them, but obviously you probably know this already. In a rainforest or jungle, lots of brightly colored flowers, like orchids. And then finally, real big, I'm going to write it, those plants that grow on the surface, bromeliads that can grow on the ground, but they can also grow on the surface of other trees to get more sunlight. And they also have those waxy leaves, bromeliads. Okay. So that's another kind of plant that we might see in the rainforest. So boys and girls, please check out our worksheet. The worksheet will help guide you. On your worksheet, you will need to draw a picture of a plant in a desert and draw a picture of a plant in the rainforest and then label some structures. Hopefully this video helps you out with that. I also encourage you to watch some National Geographic Kids videos on the desert or the rainforest in different parts of the world, and I think those will help you out as well. Or if you have a book about different types of ecosystems at home, that could help you as well. Stay curious and stay safe. We miss you. We can't wait to see you back in the gardens, and have a great day.